with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
Heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another. You've been messing around. They say you got a boy.
Welcome to Made in America. This is Neil Asbury, your host, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So a little REO Speedwagon.
Well, I thought it was appropriate. Don't you think that's appropriate? I heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend. You've been messing around. Well, I kind of think we're at an REO Speedwagon moment with President Trump. That's what I think.
Yeah. So, very fascinating. It's definitely the ante has been raised, but I don't think there's any there. It's this is politics. I mean, this is brass knuckles politics. I mean, Rich, imagine if we listened to all of our presidents talking with foreign leaders. I mean, what we might hear, and how they have sort of postured, positioned, cajoled, threatened. It's part of the game. I mean, these are countries, working together, to solve problems and to talk about things. I mean, and after all, we're all humans too, right? So, I mean, it's the human psyche at work. If you're a Democrat and you listen to that and you say, oh, yeah, that's wrong. That's so terrible. That's terrible. You listen, a Republican listens to it and they say, hey, look, this is business as usual. But if the tables were turned, it would be the exact same thing, right? The Democrats would be saying, oh, that's just normal. This is the way presidents talk with each other.
Well, they did say that. I mean, when they even said that with Jeremiah, in Chicago, they said, well, there's nothing here. I mean, this is just a distraction. They use the word distraction. This is a distraction. Well, yeah, it is a distraction from the country. It's a distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah, just saying.
Hey, let's bring in our first guest. Very good friend of our show, Jim Kennedy from the Kennedy Institute of Public Policy Research. Jim, welcome to Made in America.
Good day, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
You've been very busy this week. Lots to talk about. So what is your take on what's happened here? And, the Democrats, they haven't been able to find anything yet. Now they have this. And does it have legs? Where's it going to go? Is it going to ever get to the votes, 218 votes that they need in the House to actually impeach the president? What's in store for us?
Well, it's going to be interesting because, it's a question of what can you prove? And that's going to be what exactly can they prove? You don't see a quid pro quo in the document from what I can tell, and I don't think anyone's been even talking about a quid pro quo, but it's kind of like, well, that doesn't necessarily get Trump off. And it's like, well, if you don't have a quid pro quo, what's the actual benefit? And what exactly is the problem here? I mean, he's offering to send the Attorney General and Rudy Giuliani, who's a former federal prosecutor and a fairly distinguished one, man who cleaned up Wall Street in the 80s and 90s before becoming mayor of New York. But the question I'm looking at when you read through this, I read through this document probably about 6-7 times now, especially the one paragraph where he talks about it. He only brings it up twice about the investigation. And what if he's simply looking to want to know what about what Biden did as vice president? Yes, I know it benefits him from the criminal aspect, but does he not have a responsibility to America to investigate what Joe Biden was doing? Because Biden's been out there bragging about, oh, I stopped this prosecution, or we're not going to give them $1 billion unless you stop this thing, and I got it stopped. So it's like, well, should Biden have been doing that? Should he have been meddling in an internal investigation in a foreign country where his son might have been exposed and simply want to look into the investigation? Not so much that he's saying, hey, I want you to go back out and investigate it again, but I want to find out why the investigation was stopped the first time, and is there anything wrong that Joe Biden did there?
Well, I think from a semantic point of view, there's a tremendous difference between what Biden did and what Mr. Trump has done. And that is Biden made a demand. It was very obvious. And he bragged about it. Well, you're going to do this. And by the way, you've got 6 hours or you're not getting that money. 6 hours, you're not getting the money. All right. I didn't see any of that. I heard and asked. I read and asked. Could you do this? Could you look into this? Would you work with my attorney general? Would you mind working with Rudy Giuliani? It wasn't, well, if you do not do this, you're in trouble, buddy. I didn't see that. Did you?
No, I didn't see. Like you said, no quid pro quo. There's nothing about if you don't do this, this is what we will do to you, or this is what we will not do for you. So no, absolutely not. I completely agree. Yeah.
So Jim, doesn't the President of the United States have a responsibility to the American taxpayer that's about to send $400 million of aid to a country that is notoriously, monumentally corrupt? And we've seen that with Biden. And we've seen even with, the Obama administration saying that they were monumentally corrupt. Nobody seems to disagree that they are corrupt. You're sending this hard-earned treasure from the American worker to the Ukraine for a purpose that's to make the country better, safer, the world safer. So doesn't the president have a right to try to find out, is this money going to be used properly? What sort of levels of corruption are there? And are we making a great investment here in wanting to hear it directly from the president's mouth about what's going on with some of these corrupt practices? Seems to be like a legitimate ask to me.
I don't see any problem with it at all. He's a new president coming in. He wants to know what, Trump wants to know what this guy is. This guy is dirty as the rest of them. Is he clean? Is he going to run a clean government? And plus the thing that's also interesting to think about is we're giving $400 million to Ukraine. Now, I thought Ukraine was basically Putin. Are we not upsetting Putin by this? Because of his desire to basically shut down Ukraine. So if Trump is Putin's, in Putin's pocket, why are we giving Ukraine this kind of money? So it kind of defeats a lot more of the whole Russian.
By the way, which is military
concept.
aid.
But that's
military
exactly
aid to
right.
fight the Russians.
Exactly. And doesn't he have the right to make sure that military materiel gets into the right hands? I mean,
Yes,
after all,
absolutely.
remember, a commercial jet was shot down over the Ukraine. Don't forget that.
Right,
Under mysterious circumstances.
It's a rough part of the world. It's a rough and tumble area.
Yeah.
It's a rough and tumble area, right? I mean, so the president, I think, would have a right to ask that. And Jim, wouldn't the president also have the right that if there is corruption going on, and both parties agree to it, right? Democrats and Republicans both agree. And if an American happens to be participating in that corruption, should not the president have the right to ask the question, if we are giving you this money, we want it to be clean. We know that there has been corrupt past practices. You're the new president. What are you doing to clean it up? And has there been Americans that have been participating in this corrupt practice in your country? Isn't that a legitimate ask?
Absolutely. I believe there's something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that was passed in the late 70s, early 80s, if I'm not mistaken, that deals specifically with this type of thing, and we need to make sure that no Americans are involved and that we're not aiding and abetting their corruption. That's why I think if you go in there and investigate, how did Biden get this shut down? What was Biden's purposes for getting this shut down? You begin to start looking at Joe Biden in a different light. Yes, it unfortunately influences Trump in the election. But then again, if you start looking at some of the primary polls right now, Biden isn't the strongest guy right now in the election. Elizabeth Warren is pulling up and passing him in some states. I think she just passed him earlier in the week in New Hampshire.
So she must be very happy with this. This is great for her.
They got to just sit back and watch this happen.
Maybe they're part of it.
2 months from now, Joe Biden may be just an afterthought as far as the primary. He may be down to 5 or 4%, and this turns out to be not something about influencing the election, but truly about getting rid of corruption in Ukraine. And what did Biden's role and what was Biden involved with?
But Rich, I see that the left stream media is saying, and they're getting very incensed about it, that this is a false equivalence. It's a false equivalence. So if we're talking about impeaching Trump and, here is this thing and he's abusing power and he's doing all these terrible things, and then you say, well, he's only trying to get to the truth of what's happened with Biden and his son and all of the stuff he's even on record of saying, and it's a false equivalence. How can you even compare the two?
What do you expect them to say?
Exactly.
I mean, I don't. Schiff. What do you expect Schiff to say?
But how? And I'm not talking about Schiff now. I'm talking about the media, who is ostensibly, or at least trying to play. Oh well, we're just being objective about this. But how? What a crock of bull.
The media has no choice. The left-stream media has no choice. They have been wrong on every score as recently as just 2 weeks ago with Kavanaugh again. Every one of their agenda items has fallen apart. And this one, I project, is going to fall apart as well.
So, Jim, they're going all in on this one.
Oh, absolutely. This is their latest and greatest, and they're doing everything they can to try to get something to stick on this, and we'll see what happens.
So now we got the whistleblower. We got the whistleblower. Now, who is he or she? Are they in a position to be even classified, as a whistleblower? And, what's likely to come out of this? But I got a couple more questions. Jim, stick with us. We got to take a quick break, but we're going to talk about the whistleblower. Very, very important stuff. Folks, stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we're with our good friend Jim Kennedy from the Kennedy Institute of Public Policy Research. So, Jim, the whistleblower. Now, who is he or she? I guess we're going to find out pretty soon. But we do know this, that they have hired a high-powered Democrat lawyer who's worked with Hillary Clinton. Kind of sounds like what we went through with the Kavanaugh thing. Already we're hearing that this is a partisan person. Maybe we shouldn't draw that conclusion yet, but that seems to be what is out there. Now, it's going to be all about the credibility of the whistleblower, and do they have a political axe to grind? Now, we found that out, so many times before that that's exactly what it's been about. Is, someone from the opposite spectrum of the ideology that comes forth because, they're doing it out of their moral obligation. And,
I know what it is. They're pulling a Comey.
Okay, there you go. That's a great analogy.
They're pulling a Comey.
That's a great analogy. But how important is, who this whistleblower is and what sort of political sort of motivations they might have?
I think it has to be taken into account with all of the other data and information and the transcript. Does this person have an agenda? Is this another person that's got, that thinks they want to become the glorious leader of the hashtag resist movement? They wake up every morning with Trump being president, and it drives them so crazy and so nuts. They've got to do everything they can to make sure that Donald Trump is not president by the end of the day, that they will do whatever they can. They got this opportunity. They became a whistleblower, and now they hope this is what's going to bring Trump down. If not, they hope someone else will do it tomorrow and someone else the next day and the next day.
So I have a question for you, Jim. So the complaint was not released to Congress. They didn't get it. The House didn't get it. And they're very, very upset. They're saying, oh, my God, this is part of the obstruction. Trump is doing this. But it really looked to me, and you can probably clarify this, was it turned down not going to the House and not being released because it did not meet the criteria, because it was hearsay, because the complainant was not, an actual first person of, listening to it? What was the reason it wasn't turned down? It doesn't sound like it was Trump that held it back. Or maybe it was.
No, not to my knowledge. And I think basically yes, yes, and yes. It was hearsay. It was a person that I have heard, that we do not know for sure, that it is of questionable political background, meaning they may have had an agenda here to address. So until that person, I believe the person though has come forward because they are very eager to testify in front of Congress, which kind of, again, I don't know, that could mean that they want to clear Trump, or they want to lead the hashtag resist movement against Trump and be the glorious leader in the Congress. They get to be the person that brings down Trump.
Yeah,
so I don't know
but
what
look what happened
means.
with Mueller when they did that. Didn't go well for them very well, did it?
It hasn't gone well for anybody they brought up. It certainly didn't go well for Comey and all of his hashtag resist efforts. So no, nobody has really been there. I mean, pretty much it's It's resist movement 47 or resist movement 0, Trump 47 at this point, give or take a couple of them. They've tried so many things. So let's see if this is one. But
so Jim, this cannot play out well for Biden. It can't. I just don't see. I mean, it's kind of like he's part of that establishment. He's the old way of doing things. You know, he's from the machine. He's the machine guy. He's so now tainted by the machine. I don't know how, you know, the left, the socialist wing of the Democrat Party, which is probably now the majority wing of the Democrat Party, can ever, you know, look at Biden the same way, you know, with this sort of innuendo and the things that's out there. And even the things that he said now, I mean, coming from his own mouth, can't help him. Right. Warren is rising in the polls. What's the political calculus of this whole thing now as you see it?
Well, I mean, you know, Biden's a walking malaprop. I mean, the guy opens his mouth and something hilarious comes out of it that usually is not framed or formed well into a sentence or statement. So yeah, I mean, he's a liability from that aspect. Second of all, it was always interesting. Was it the Democratic Party in its current state, as you mentioned, in socialist state that it is, going to elect an old white, you know, straight white guy? That just didn't seem to be the person that they were going to be picking as their candidate in 2020 for a party that wants to be as progressive as they are.
So, Rich, what does it do for Trump?
Well, I'll tell you what it did for Trump in the last 24 hours after, you know, they went, you know, incredibly crazy the other night, announced the impeachment inquiry. They raised $1 million in less than a day for the Republican National Committee. That's what they did. I think this is going to inure benefit to Trump. It's going to hurt Biden, and I think it's going to bite the bottom of the Democrats. I think they're in big trouble. I think the moderate Democrats, if they are anymore, at least those that ran in areas that Trump won, are going to be in big trouble, and I don't think it's going to work for them at all. That's my opinion.
So, Jim, man, it's always been wonderful to be with you. It's, again, great that you joined us today. The story's unfolding. Obviously, we're going to be watching it very closely. Very important for our country, very important for our economy. You know, what's it going to do to all this momentum we're building? You know, the country's going to be focused on that. The government's going to be focused on that. They're not going to be doing the work of the American people. And that is the sad thing to come out of this. Jim Kennedy from the Kennedy Institute of Public Policy Research. Thanks, Jim, for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it as always.
Coming up, we have Rose Tennent, who is a talk radio host, Rich. Mm-hmm. She's the author of Thanking Our Soldiers. And there's a Made in America 2019 event coming up at the Indiana Convention Center on October 3rd through 6th about promoting American products. People should buy more American products. That's what we're all about here at Made in America. Don't want to miss it. Rose is going to be with us in just a moment.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Roppin. So, Rich, our government is going to be out there, you know, working on behalf of the American people. They're going to be so messed up with this whole wild goose chase of impeachment, and it's going to get very, very nasty. It's going to get very hot. It's going to get very divided, and they're not going to be able to work on or pass any legislation. Mm-hmm. I believe that's going to help the American worker. That's going to further our position in the world. You know, what's going to happen with the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade.
That's right. And there's been a lot of talk about that this week. They're saying, well, how is Pelosi going to have time to go ahead and push through the USMCA at the same time she's trying to push through a non-voted for impeachment process, which is not really real, but kind of real that we're looking at it. There's some integrity. We're not sure, but we'll let you know.
And, oh, yeah, but we still want to do the work of the American people. And how about infrastructure? You know, wasn't this Congress, the American people gave the responsibility to the Congress, to the Democrats, because they were supposed to go and get the people's work done. You know, all of that is out the window. This isn't about a Congress anymore that is looking out for America. This is a Congress that's looking out for themselves and their own partisan interests, unfortunately. But fortunately, there are a lot of Americans out there, wonderful Americans, who are picking it up and are continuing to do the great work on behalf of the American entrepreneur, small business, the American manufacturer, the American inventor, the risk takers, all those folks out there that really make our economy work. Now, it would be great to get some help from our government, but we're just not going to get that. We're not. So it's going to be people like our next guest, Rose Tennent, who, by the way, Rich, is also a talk radio host.
I've heard
is
her.
Author of Thanking Our Soldiers, and she's here to talk today about Made in America 2019, which is an event, tracks 30,000 people to Indiana. And it's at the Indiana Convention Center in Indianapolis, October 3rd through the 6th. Very important event. This is the kind of things that's out there, folks, that we should all be proud about. The people who are not studying their watch and depending on whatever happens in Washington, and, they can't get anything done unless they watch Washington and get leadership out of Washington, because there is no leadership in Washington. But there is leadership in people like Rose. Rose, welcome to Made in America.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. It's great to talk to both of you, Neil and Rich. Thanks for having me on.
So tell us about this. I mean, so much noise in Washington, but in the heartland of America, you make us proud with things like Made in America 2019 and promoting the American manufacturer and bringing visibility to the good stuff that they do and the issues that they face. So tell us, what is the event, and who's going to be there, and what should we be thinking about?
Well, actually, it's the first time ever that we're holding an event like this. It's highlighting all manufacturers who are committed to producing and sourcing their product right here in the United States. So it's really exciting because Don Buckner, who is the founder of MadeInAmerica.com, wanted to do this all his life. Don has a great story himself. He started as a mechanic. He started a small business in his garage. A lot of times that's what's happening here in this country. That's what makes this country so great, guys, too. I know you agree with me. The freedom to pursue something like that in your garage, right? And it became a very successful company. He sold it, and he decided to use that money and put it towards something that he had always wanted to do, and that was an organization that would support businesses who were committed to American-made products.
So what are some of the things that you specifically do with your organization to help American manufacturers stay in this country to produce products here? Because, a lot of American factories have to rely on other support industries in order to help them make really great products here. So it's very complicated. It's very complicated when a lot of times those support industries have left our country, like tool makers, tool and die makers.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an artisan thing, and it's so hard to get it back once you lose it. I mean, I think this is a big challenge for us. So what are you guys doing specifically to help us?
And I'm so glad you brought that up. And plus, I would like to just address something that you just said. A lot of the entrepreneurs that I'm talking to, the manufacturers that I've been speaking to over the last few months, have been telling me that they saw the trade wars on the horizon. And, business owners aren't stupid. They knew where things were headed. They believed the president when he said this is what I intend to do. So when they saw that on the horizon, they started taking steps 1 year ago, 2 years ago, to make sure that they were going to find those companies. And here's the cool part. If the companies, because you bring up an important subject that we lost some of that, but if they couldn't find a company where they could source the materials they needed, they found that new businesses were actually sprouting up over the last 2 years to meet the new demands of those businesses who either have committed to being American-made or saw those trade wars on the horizon.
Well, what's interesting,
yeah.
In the last few years, now that we've had President Trump and we've had this tremendous influx of funds coming in from all over the world, we're the strongest economy of the world right now. People want to be here. Money's coming in from Europe and other places around the world. That also helps the average, man or woman who wants to be an innovator, who wants to create something, because there's more cash available. It makes a stronger market, and it gives the opportunity to develop R&D. To bring product to market. So I think all of that, if you look back over the last 2 years, really has made in America a better place to be made in America.
And, when I think about that's a great point. And, we just celebrated, 243 years of independence. When you consider our founding fathers, they came here. They came from from Europe, where, you were only going to be successful, or you only had that level of intelligence if you were born into it. But they believed that there was genius in every person, that if a person had that ability, that freedom to pursue their passion, to pursue their interests, that they too could be a success. They didn't believe that it had anything to do with the bloodline. And that's what makes this country so great. And that's what our founding fathers were looking for from the very beginning, is that freedom to go ahead and pursue those passions. Because we do have that genius in us, and they were not free to explore those things when they were in Europe. So it does look into that. And the other thing too that you mentioned that I want to touch on is that what we're seeing right now is such an influx, and we've seen over 500,000 new manufacturing jobs in the last 2.5 years. Businesses are telling me that they are they're doing so well under this economy, and we have someone who has the business owner's best interest at heart. What's best interest at heart for business people and for our citizens here. And one of the things that I appreciate about Made in America is what we're doing, and you touched on this too, Rich, just a moment ago, is that we are providing jobs for other Americans. It's like one of the most patriotic things you can do, right, is an American providing a job for another American. So every time that we hear that, that they're now being committed to, or of course because of the trade wars, to look to domestically for those materials and to source them here rather than overseas, then we are providing new opportunities now for those people here. And I'm going to tell you something else. The words "Made in America," they mean something, again, not just domestically, but overseas as well. The world recognizes that those words mean something. And they do. Our landfills are full of items from China that break or were never put together right in the first place.
Hey, Rose, we're going to take a quick break right now, but we're on with Rose Tennent, talk radio show host, and she's involved with Made in America 2019 in Indianapolis coming up October 3rd through 6th. A very important event for American manufacturers. We're going to continue talking about that. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury. We're talking with Rose Tennent together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rose is a talk radio host, and she's intimately involved with the trade show Made in America 2019 that's coming up at the Indianapolis, or actually the Indiana Convention Center in Indianapolis on October 3rd through 6th. Very, very important event. So, Rose, we just talked about having to support industries for our factories, and that means we need all kinds of people who form metals, who inject plastics, who make motors and circuit boards and wiring harnesses and all sorts of things that would go into a product. Just countless things. But the other thing, Rose, that we're lacking in our country is workers who are specifically trained to run the type of machinery that a lot of factories depend on, CNC, computer numerical controlled type of machines. It's not this simple type of old flywheel presses that you see in a 1940s snapshot of a photograph of a factory. These big dirty machines leaking oil all over the place. No, these are very sophisticated high-tech machines that are computer controlled, and they're very complicated. But our vocational schools, though, in America we've turned the back on vocational training, and our high school kids are just not getting access to that like they did when I grew up. And I think this is a big problem. It's a very big problem if we are committed to make things in this country. What can we do about that?
That's a really good point. I was just talking to economist Stephen Moore the other day about that very same thing. I think there's something like 7.5 million of those type of jobs that are available right now. But as you said, we don't have those skilled workers for it because people aren't attending those trade schools. And some of the economists have been kicking around the idea of making the trade school education almost equivalent to a 4-year degree so that it does hold some sort of, maybe in the mind of those who are attending or in the minds of others who are hiring them, but it gives them that same level of capability. It gives them that same sense of accomplishment. But we do need to find some incentives to get students, because not everyone is cut out. I mean, we're going to be really hurting. If we think we're hurting right now, those are a lot of jobs that haven't been filled in that industry. But down the road, that number is going to be even higher yet. And that does affect, how much we can produce here in the States.
What the whole concept, and when I was younger and I was graduating high school, of course, my parents insisted you're going to go to college, and just college isn't enough. You got to get your bachelor's, and you got to get a master's degree, and you got to go on and do better. And if you're Jewish, which I was, you have to get a doctorate, and have to be an MD. And if you're not, don't come home, and Aunt Sophie won't talk to you. But that's changed. I mean, that's all changed. And the truth of the matter is, the college degree is not the cachet that it was years ago. I'll give you an example. My older son did go to college, got a degree, but he's been in a job with Apple since he was in high school. I mean, he actually applied for a job at an Apple store when he had just turned 16. He was legal to do that in the mall. He got the job. He went to college. He kept his job while he went through college. And he has his job that has no relevance whatsoever with what he was learning in college. He's been moving up and moving up and moving up for all these years. He's halfway to retirement, and he's just a kid. He's like 29 years old, and he's got all this stuff going on. But the world has changed. And I think what Neil's pointing out and you're pointing out is that you really have to let people know there is another whole landscape out there that you can walk through that can make your life and the world better. And I guess when people come to Made in America 2019, and good Lord, you're going to have 30,000 of them, maybe they're looking for something like that. What are they looking for when they come to your event?
Well, listen, I'm glad you brought that back up again, because if you're interested, it's not just business to business, but it's business to consumer as well. Go to madeinamerica.com, and you can get a 3-day pass. It's just like going to a home show or something like that. It's really cheap. It's under $25. Or there's still time maybe to exhibit. There just might be. But really, we're encouraging people to come out and not only support those businesses that have committed to Made in America, but also to actually learn, because you can be incentivized yourself. You said earlier there are opportunities for people out there. I'm going to be heading up a panel of women manufacturers, female manufacturers, and it's just an opportunity to encourage, to highlight, and to hopefully keep the momentum going.
So, Rose, very, very great to have you with us. Great job with Made in America 2019. An incredible event, a very important event. If our government won't govern, it's going to be us. It's going to be the people. It's going to be folks like you and me and Rich that are going to carry the mantle of the American worker. And there's a lot of work to be done, and you're doing it. God bless you for doing it. Rose Tennent.
You too.
Talk radio host and author of Thanking Our Soldiers. Thanks for being with us, Rose. Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Hasbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, to bring up a point that I made just a short while ago, our country, our government, and I should say our country, is going to be so sidetracked, so messed up with whatever is about to come. And it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be very, very ugly. I'm talking about the impeachment proceedings, or whatever they do.
Remember, they have not gone to the floor. They haven't voted, so you're tap dancing this
they don't
right now on the
vote,
periphery of it.
They don't want to vote right now because, they got only 170 votes, and they need 218. So they haven't voted because the votes aren't there. Now, they're going to go through all of this shenanigans, and they're going to have, these witnesses, and all these panels are going to come up with, I guess there's 6 of them, and they're going to come up with what they think the articles of impeachment should be, and they vote on them individually. So they can come up with 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 things, see what sticks to the wall. When it happened with Clinton, the House committees came up with 5 different articles of impeachment, and they passed 2. right? So I guess if you pass only one, it means that you're impeached. And then it's what happens in the Senate. That's what really matters. So in the Senate, you know, obviously what they're telegraphing right now, based on everything that we know, is that, you know, it's going nowhere. You know, in fact, Mitch McConnell can, you know, he can limit the time for any of this stuff and make it as brief as he wants to. And so but it's going to take months to get there. And in the middle of all this, we're going to have a presidential campaign going on where we're probably going to have some very left progressive candidate, socialist, coming out of the Democrat side of this whole process that's going to run against economic freedom as we know it. You know, you're going to have this socialist versus economic freedom sort of platform that America will be voting on with all this other noise and all this other noise that's there. This is a sad, sad thing, though, for America, because our Congress is not going to be doing anything other than going down this rabbit hole. It's going to be terrible. Legislation, trade agreements, things that we need, you know, to help with tax relief, regulatory relief, all the different things that, you know, Congress should be doing to strengthen our economy. They are going to be so far away from doing the good stuff because they're so focused on all the bad stuff.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, that's the whole point. But, you know, there's another message in that we need to look at, and it's not even so subliminal. It really helps and gives benefit to the Republicans. And that is the Democrats have basically done nothing. They have not passed anything important. They've not helped America. There's no infrastructure development. There are no laws that will help us. The trade laws that we're trying to get, the agreements that we're trying to get through are in a quagmire right now. There's no cooperation from the left side to the right side, from the blue to the red. And all of that, not part of it, but all of that goes back to the Democrats and their inability to see the reality of what's going on. Interesting, AOC, you know, from New York. AOC says, oh, this is great. We're really rallying. We've really, you know, gelled the Democratic Party. We're all one right now. And yet when I listen to Axelrod out of Chicago, who's, you know, obviously he got
Obama elected.
Got Obama elected. He says,
guy.
Hang on, guys, because you know what? I'm not saying this is good for the Democrats. I think this is going to go bad for the Democrats. It's going to go good for the Republicans. And Karl Rove actually agreed with Axelrod. So you have Karl Rove and Axelrod saying to the Democrats, you guys are going down, you know, a bad rabbit hole here. But what does it really say? They don't care about America. They only care about their power and protecting their own. Not a good message.
Well, yeah, I mean, the people are, you know, the super progressives are in very safe seats, and they're putting the folks in the middle at great risk.
There are 30 Democrat moderates, so to speak,
who won in Trump districts,
who said, listen, we can work with Trump. And they got elected. They got elected on a lie, because now the lie is out, because there is no vote. They're all included in this right now. And so the difference that we have now versus what happened with Bill Clinton, Congress voted to impeach and start the inquiry. They voted on moving forward with impeachment. Nobody has voted. Nancy Pelosi has unilaterally come out on this. Jerry Nadler, wonderful guy, great human being, wasn't at my bar mitzvah. He's decided we're going to waste our time on this. They've made those decisions unilaterally. That's what I'm saying. There's a big difference. Big difference.
Well, Rich, more to come. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today. But don't worry, we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.